Alright, hello. This will be a quick one. I am doing podcast to podcast promotion. Alright, this stream might be a quick one because I have something else to do. All these stream titles are the titles of potential titles of books for the book. Okay. So I'm gonna get into it now. Hello. That's not the title. Okay. Sorry. Whoops. Building an indie business in the center of venture capital. I am Alex Edmonds, known as Supreme Rumham on the internet, and this is the Building an Indie Business podcast. Okay, I still love that intro. Hello to all my listeners in France. Today I'm going to be talking about podcast to podcast promotion. I'm going to be talking about what it is, what types of promotions you can do, how to find someone to promote your podcast and a podcast you can promote, general tips, benefits, things you shouldn't do, and the disadvantages. Okay, first I wanted to talk about my book. I am writing a book on podcasting. What this book is a brain dump of everything I've learned about podcasting, doing this podcast. There's also extra content, things that I didn't think about when I was doing the episode or before when I was doing the outline of the episode. So extra content in there. So it's things you've already heard, and there's some episodes that I haven't written, and they will be included in the book. So about let's say a month worth of content is going to be in the book. Okay, so let's get into it. What is podcast to podcast promotion? It is helping other podcasters by having their podcasts on your podcast and switching, having your podcast on their podcast. So what are the types of swaps? You can have a host as a guest to talk about their podcast on your podcast. You can add one of their episodes to your RSS feed. You can have snippets of their podcast on your podcast episode. So like in your general announcements before the episode, you can have a little snippet of their podcast. Okay. And finally, you can talk about their podcast in your general announcements yourself. Okay. So how to find a host to swap with. The very first place you can look is the Open Podcast Forum, because there is a category where we allow people to exchange, ask if someone is looking for a guest or if someone is looking for a host. So you can ask, would you be willing to promotional swap for my podcast with your podcast? Okay. The next thing you can do is you can email other hosts. So if you listen to other podcasts similar to your category, I would suggest emailing the... okay, I need to redo this one. Stop. Building an indie business in the center of venture capital. I am Alex Edmonds, also known as Supreme Realm Ham on the internet, and this is the Building an Indie Business podcast. Okay, today I will be discussing P2P swaps. And what is P2P swaps? It's podcast-to-podcast promotions. But first, I wanted to talk about my book. What is my book? It is a brain dump of everything I've learned about podcasting in written form. So a lot of the episodes that I've done will be in the book. What makes the book different from the podcast? I have added extra content. So there are things that I didn't think about while I was recording or outlining the episode, and those things are in the book. So you get extra content, bonus content, if you will. If you have an interest in having a written version of my podcast, the link to the book is in the show notes. So you can order it right now. Okay. Now on to the episode. So what is P2P promotions? It is podcast-to-podcast promotions. So you're promoting your podcast or promoting someone else's podcast on your podcast, and someone else is promoting your podcast on their podcast. Okay. There are 4 different kinds of promotions that you can do. The first promotion is have a host of another podcast as a guest on your podcast, and then you have them discuss their podcast. Okay. So another type of swap or promotion is the add an episode of their podcast to your RSS feed. So what this is you receive an episode of their podcast. You maybe say you edit it a little bit. You say, hey, this is a podcast episode that's from this podcast. Enjoy. And that way listeners know that this is a different podcast. Okay. So the third way is you can add a snippet of their podcast to your episode and play that right before you get into your content. So you can add maybe a snippet of a host explaining their podcast or someone else reviewing their podcast. So that way listeners will hear that right before your podcast episode. Okay. The final type of swap that you can do is you can talk about a host's podcast on your podcast. Just simply talk about it, talk about what it's about, what you like about it, things like that. Okay. How can you find another host to swap with? Okay. The first place you can look is the Open Podcast Forum, where there's a category to find people to swap with. The category is called Promotional Swap. So you list what your podcast is about, and then if someone is interested in swapping with you and has a similar category, they can say, hey, let's swap. Okay. So the second way is you can email hosts. So if you listen to podcasts that are similar to yours, you can email that host and say, hey, I have a similar podcast with a similar content. We should do a promotional swap. And then if they say yes, you do it. If they say no, you move on. Okay. The next and final way that you can find a host to swap with is ask your audience. Say, hey, is there a podcast that you guys like that is similar to mine? And when they give you those answers, you now have a list of podcasts that are similar to yours that you can contact the hosts and see if they want to do a swap. Okay. Tips. The first tip is that the metrics are measured by month. They're measured monthly. So you only really need an episode in your RSS feed for 1 month. So after 1 month, you can delete that episode. And you want to do this because someone new stumbling onto your podcast might be confused by the different episode in your RSS feed. Okay. The next tip is invite the host that you're swapping with to engage with your community before and after the episode. Okay. So if you've been following this podcast for a while and you now have started your podcast, then you have a community for your podcast to hang out, or for your podcast listeners to hang out in. And so you can invite the host to engage with your community, and then after the episode, your community can then ask the host questions about the podcast or information that they gave during the podcast. Okay. So, the next tip is that you want to make it clear that the episode is someone else's. And the way you do this is by saying, hey, you add audio to the episode that they send you, and then you say, hey, this is a different podcast. Enjoy. That way, it's the very first thing they hear before the episode even, and they know it's a different podcast. Okay. If your swaps are getting lower amounts of listens than your regular episodes, stop doing them, because that means your audience does not want to hear different podcasts from someone else. Okay. The final tip is have a standard episode ready to swap. And what else I would suggest is that you have maybe your best episode ready to swap, so that this new audience is hearing you at your best. Okay. Now on to benefits. The first benefit that I would say is that your podcast is being heard by a different audience with similar interests. So that means that the audience that is hearing your podcast is more likely to convert than a people in a different place that don't listen to podcasts or don't have an similar interest than your podcast listeners now. Okay. The next benefit is networking. And what I mean by this is that you're getting to know a podcast host that has similar content to you. So you're basically getting to know more people in your industry. And that way, if you need advice or you need help promoting something other than your podcast, then you could ask them. You could be like, hey, can you help me promote this? Have you ever been in this situation? So yeah, that's great. Another great benefit is that for the week that you have the different episode, that's a week that you can take off and you don't have to create content, which I think is great. Okay. Another benefit is that assuming you do it for free, then you're getting free publicity and free traffic to your podcast, which I think is great. Okay. Backlinks. When someone has a podcast, that podcast gets put on a lot of players, and those players they go on Google, and so having your podcast in their show notes increases your backlinks and makes your podcast more reliable or trustworthy to Google. So when someone Googles your podcast, it'll be more likely to show up on the first page of Google, which will get you more clicks. Okay. The last benefit is that there are many podcasts to swap with. So there are 1 million podcasts as of right now. And so there's not just like 4 or 5 podcasts that you can swap with. There are thousands. So yeah, if you keep reaching out to people, someone will say, hey, I'm willing to swap with you. Okay. All right, now on to the don'ts of P2P swaps. The first don't is you don't want to swap too many times in a row because, what was I going to say? Oh yeah, that's going to be like a stretch of podcast episodes that aren't yours. And so when someone stumbles onto your podcast, they'll think that those different episodes are yours. And if they don't like those episodes, then they'll stop listening to your podcast, or they won't subscribe to your podcast, which is unfortunate. Okay. The second and final don't is don't go too much out of your own category in terms of the podcast you're swapping with. Stay in a similar category. So for me, I probably wouldn't do like a venture-backed podcast category, or not a category, but like a podcast that is talking about like venture-backed companies, because I'm talking about an indie business, a bootstrapped company podcast. So I'd stick to like the indie bootstrapper category. I also wouldn't do like a swimming podcast because I don't know how many swimmers are interested in bootstrapping or indie business things. Okay. The next topic I'm going to discuss is the disadvantages. So the first disadvantage that I thought about is that you have to trust someone else to help you out. So when you send them your audio, you have to trust that they're going to put your audio in their RSS feed. And they might wait for you to do it for them and then not do it for you. So you have to trust that they're going to do it, which they might be a stranger, so you never know. Okay. The next disadvantage is that podcast, their episode, the way they structure their episode, it might not flow with your podcast and your content, and that would create some problems with your listeners when they go from your structure to the new podcast that's different, that back to your structure. It might be confusing to listeners and they might stop listening. Sorry. Okay. Another disadvantage is that your audience might not like the fact that you're swapping, or the episode that you're swapping with, or the podcast you're swapping with. And for that reason, they might not like your podcast anymore or listen to your podcast. So you'll lose listeners because you're swapping. But also, they might make up for it. The people coming in from the other podcasts, they might make up for the fact that people are leaving because of your podcast, because of your swap. You know what I mean? So yeah, that might be a problem, but also might not be a problem. I don't know. These are the things I think about. Okay. Second to last, penultimate disadvantage is that people might attack you online. And this is a long shot, but I thought about it. So you might say something that they don't like in that episode that you send out. So they might, I don't know, they might attack you, they might make fun of you, they might try to cancel you. I don't know. I don't really see the canceling happening because, like, for me, I'm not that big of a person, or I don't have a big audience, so you can't really cancel me. You know what I mean? I think you know what I mean. Okay. And the final disadvantage, and the last thing I'm going to talk about, is that some of the types of swaps are not scalable. So you can only have so many hosts as a guest, and you can only have so many snippets, and you can only talk about so many podcasts at once. The only really scalable thing is you sending out your episode for other people's RSS feed, but then to different people. But having a lot of episodes, as I've already discussed, is not scalable. Okay. That's it for now. Thank you for listening. If you would like to host your own podcast episode to get a feel about podcasting, talk to me. Hit me up on Twitter, SupremeRumHam. Telegram, same thing. Email me, supremerumham@gmail.com. And you could do an episode of the Open Podcast Community Podcast. And if you would like to write about your experience podcasting, there's the Open Podcast blog, blog.openpodcast.xyz. And I can add your article, your blog post to the Open Podcast blog. Okay. Thank you for listening. Have a nice day. Bye. Oh my God. I don't know what happened there. Yeah, that was weird. Okay. Hold on, I gotta send this text. What am I doing here? Okay. Actually, the first thing I have to do, I gotta export this. P2P. Wave. Oh, this is pretty cool. So, the thing that I'm writing, what thing am I writing? The newsletter, the Open Podcast newsletter this week. It's going to be all Open Podcast content. I'm pretty excited about it. I'm tired of having other people's content in my newsletter. It's lame. You know what I mean? Super lame. I'm super lame. That was a rendition of Super Freak. If you didn't know. Okay. No one's watching. That's okay. Someone's watching. Okay. Hello. Did you like my episode? Was it awkward? I feel like it was awkward. What did I just do with it? Oh, I put it. It's confusing. No, not here. Okay. Here. What is this? What is this? Leave me alone. No, it's fine. What the fuck is this? Export. That better come out the way I like it. Or else I'll stop using Headliner. supposed to do? Oh, Jesus. Oh, do you want to check? Let's do this. Let's check my grammar stats. So 55. Last time I checked. Still 55. Oh, I gotta do something. Okay, my page. Okay. What am I gonna do now? Oh yeah, I was going to upload the episode. P2P. Okay. Dude. 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 Okay. Okay. Alright. That's one episode done that I needed to do. I have a list of episodes. Oh my god, where's my pen? That's what I hate about recording. Oh, here it is. P2P promotions. Done. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 episodes left to record. Alright. Oh, dude. Oh, dude. Oh, dude. And then the book is done? Question mark? I've been writing jokes too. They're all about the internet. I'm an internet comic. Just because why have I been doing that? Oh yeah, because of the quarantine, I need something not internet based too. And so I write it in my handy dandy notebook. Okay. Okay. Alright. Yeah, that's what I do in my free time. I have one episode, not one episode. There's like I have a joke, and it's basically just me complaining about Twitter. Okay. I gotta go. The reason why this was supposed to be short is now here. Okay.